One of the biggest political discussions in India over the last few years has been the caste census. Despite being a firm opponent of the exercise, the BJP announced earlier this year of enumerating castes in the upcoming decadal census. However, Professor Anand Teltumbde, an anti-caste proponent, has been quite skeptical of this. A public intellectual and a vociferous writer on caste issues, Professor Teltumbde has articulated his views in his latest book, Caste Census. We have Professor Teltumbde here with us to discuss more on this topic. Sir, thanks for speaking to us.
Thank you.
At a time when the entire social justice circle has been celebrating the political consensus on this issue, why do you call it a con? Why is there a deceit in this?
Actually, con represents the or relates with things around caste, whether it is reservation, whether it is discourses and consensus around that, which actually isolates me as an odd man out. As you prefaced, actually, I'm not against caste census, but any project you undertake, there is a discipline about it, that you test out the feasibility. What is feasible, So that you do firstly. So if you now take stock of what things are going on with this regime, and even earlier, I'm not isolating only BJP. BJP is a sample of kind, but even earlier regime, post-colonial regimes, then you actually take stock of something like constitutional morality, whether these people have been concerned with the people's issues and they have everything they actually project in terms of what suits them in their politics. So this also is one of the issues, which would actually marginalize many of the issues and just create a caste turbulence. So that is what I expressed skepticism, not an opposition as such. I'm a data man. Let me preface about that. I might be the only person who actually worked with the data systems in entire discourse. So, okay, I couldn't be against data. Caste census will generate data and data are welcome. But how, at what cost and with what consequence is to be accounted for. And because of that, the bottom line is that one has to be a bit careful and not flow in something like a populist current that, okay, and unnecessarily celebrate. Because the very fact that BJP has turned around and started supporting it from their earlier vehement opposition itself actually connotes that there is something fishy about whole thing.
You point out in the book that the BJP's track record regarding data management is not up to the mark, and that data inconvenient to the ruling regime has been set aside several times. Why do you feel the data is not secure with the current regime?
Yeah, let me tell you from my data science experience that data is not a neutral thing. Okay. And these surveys, which would actually extract the caste data, etc., is not so much. There is so much of a politics at every stage. The way you design when you have a conceptual design, that the 0th step about the surveys, etc., that itself is a very political thing. How you code, how you kind of chalk out the methodology, etc. Then comes to the methods of extraction, data extraction. There would be many enumerators appealed, and they would be rather inserting the data, and then their data entries, people, etc., would take over. And then data processing. And how do you release to the public? All these steps are all full of politics. They're fraught with politics. So that should not be lost sight of. Now, BJP's track record is very obvious to the extent that even the international institutes actually started disbelieving Indian data. Okay, recently there is something in news about our GDP data that IMF this year also graded it as a C, given as a C grade, just the lowest second grade. Okay, this is very shameful for the major country like India. That needs to be seen, meaning how to what extent this regime goes. So this also is a ploy. Data is not to be taken neutral. There are a lot many ways data could be manipulated, data could be deformed, and various kinds of inferences could be drawn from the same data. So this is not a neutral exercise, and there is so much of a politics, and it is very obvious. Nobody needs to explicitly say such thing. People ought to understand, at least intellectuals ought to understand on the social justice side, as you started with. These people needed to tell people that this is not a simple exercise, it is quite a political one, and people needed to be cautious about it.
Sir, if I may quote from the book, support for the caste census has been a fashionable position amongst progressives, but the long-term impact of this exercise deserves careful attention. You have criticized the EWS scheme, which is income-based reservation introduced by BJP, as unconstitutional. Do you feel the data may be interpreted in such a way as to make an argument for EWS by showing that upper castes are economically weaker and argue that the need for caste-based reservation is over? Do you see this as a risk?
Yeah. If you look at chronologically, so BJP vehemently opposed it, okay? Caste census. 2021, they gave an affidavit to Supreme Court and said that there's a conscious policy decision that we would not be including caste enumeration in the next census. Then in 24, during 24 elections, Modi has mocked the demand, saying that it's an urban Naxal idea. Okay,
Right.
not once, or he has been actually went berserk about saying such kinds of things. And suddenly on 30th April this year, the cabinet decision, without any kind of explanation or anything, takes a decision that they would include it. So, can you not smell a rat? So what is actually driving it is obvious, because the Bihar election actually set the context. Now this government had tested something like a defeat in 24 election. If they had not sought the support of Nitish Kumar and Chandrababu Naidu, they had lost power. So now in Bihar election, if he persists with the opposition to caste census, it would actually look odd to the people, because he's in alliance with the Nitish Kumar, So that is one of the immediate prompt. But BJP is a very, very astute user of caste calculus. So this is not to be kind of relied upon so much, because they would have patched it up, but they have actually understood. They have understood, and even 2024 election data also shows that there is something that was happening. Their mainstay has been OBC and the upper strata of OBC, which actually are educated and mobility seeking segment, actually was drifting away from OBC, because they got frustrated with this kind of false kinds of claims of BJP, etc. They read through BJP's tactics. So they had shifted away from BJP. However, now it was an imperative need for BJP to hold on to the lower state of BJP. And when this demand was actually getting mass traction among OBCs, etc., BJP realized that persistence with opposition is no longer going to work, and it is going to isolate the large segment of their constituency away. But ideologically, there is a subtext to entire thing. They would not be only again influenced by such kind of thing. BJP can manage narratives, BJP can manage discourses, etc. But they would not be doing anything which is not in alignment with their long-term ideological goal, and which they inherited from RSS. And RSS long-term goal has been to do away with this caste-based reservation system. So how does it happen? Because it stands to imagination that when the caste census happens, the wealthy segment of the upper caste or general category is not going to participate well. These Murtis, Sudha Murti, Narayan Murti, etc. They have already in public that they are not going to participate in this election. So what is going to happen? What is going to happen is that the large chunk of the general category people or so-called upper caste category people are not going to participate. And those participants actually control the wealth of this country. So this would actually understate their advantage. Okay, when you compute now, meaning presuming that everything is honestly done. So this segment would come out something like as backward. Because there is a huge section, every caste has an inequality. There is a huge section of even upper caste who are equally backward as other things. So this kind of thing could be then utilized by BJP to create a narrative or seed a narrative that even the upper caste people also are as backward as this thing. So at the crux, what remains is the economics and not the caste. Okay, this is very logical kind of conclusion anybody could draw and would be very convincing. And they would then uh, sort of seed the kind of move to abolish the caste-based reservation system. So this is what needs to be understood by the people.
You are in favor of data analysis, but insist on granular data of all communities, including upper castes. However, after your book was released, a section of the right wing has misinterpreted your position as anti-reservation. Has this come to your notice? And how do you want to respond to it?
Number one, that I have not come to, it has not come to my notice that somebody has been saying that in response to the book. But I have been aware of these kind of general comments around me. Okay. Howsoever I say, and I have been saying it from rooftop, not once, twice, or 100 times, that I'm not against reservation, etc. But the way the reservation policy is weaponized by the regimes, post the Congress regime as well as now BJP regime, which is more vicious than Congress. Clearly. So that I wanted to sort of the political maneuverings around reservations that I wanted to sensitize people about. It's actually, I don't know what kind of blockheads are around. They should understand as neoliberal policies that have been operating in this country for the last 3 decades have devastated the public and government sector. Okay, if you take stock of reservations space over which the reservation pays meaning government and public sector only, no? So there only the reservation is applicable. So there has been erosion of something like 45 to 50% in employment terms. So that space is getting eroded and the entire discourse is getting shifted to something like black and white, whether you are for reservation and who the hell is against reservation? I am for reservation. Reservation was needed. Reservation was needed, but you have to understand you cannot be sold out to such kind of things whole long, because this has been a very faulty policy, and I have been now in this book, I have explicated it that how it has been faulty. Okay. Now, as regards caste census, I do not know who are the conservative elements because they're the Dane of conservatism, RSS and BJP have themselves accepted it. So what remains of the conservative, I do not understand. And again, let me be very clear about it. I am not against caste census too. I am skeptical about it. I am actually explicating to the people the politics around it. Okay. And the likely dangers that it is going to entail.
Sir, that's a very important point you make about how the existence of neoliberal setup undermines public sector and government institutions. I'll come back to that in a moment. But looking at the book, it's very clear that your skepticism about the caste census exercise is because of two reasons. One is the data concerns we have already spoken about, but secondly, even conceptually you feel the idea of caste census, as was introduced by the British in the first caste census of India in 1881, tries not to annihilate caste but rather solidify it. Why do you feel like this? And why do you think caste system is so persistent in India despite ideological confrontations in the past from Buddhism, Jainism, Islam, Sufi and Bhakti traditions and so on?
Your question has many strands. Okay, so let me tell you in brief what happened to caste system historically. And that historicity also is important in a way in the present context. What happens to caste system? Actually, caste system as it originated, and it could only be hypothesized, and there is nobody can make a concrete statement as to this is the way the caste system originated. I have also my own kind of hypothesis about it, and I have presented it in my earlier books. Okay, let's not go into that. But what happens is that the caste system became, in course of time, the life world of the people and assimilated all kinds of economic, cultural, and political relations into that. So when this meaning caste system became something like the life world of the people, and the Shraman ideologies opposed it,
Right.
Buddhism, Jainism are
Jain.
the prominent ones which survived, but there were many strands of such a Shamanism, and everybody was against this Brahminical kind of caste system at the ideological level. But but they actually opposed ideologically, but did not strike it at the structural level. So as a result, because the caste, when it became the what I said, life world, they intermingle all kinds of relation. They become something like people internalized it, and it was moreover beneficial for the self-sufficient village system. So there was kind of benefits too. So even people became Buddhist or Jain. They also actually went and projected themselves as Buddhists and Jains, but the society remained untouched. Okay. And it stands to sort of as a historical fact that Buddhism and Jainism, when they got Rajashray, etc., became something like a Vihar-centric ism. And the kind of Buddha initially preached, Charak Bhikvaya Charikam, that go and intermingle with people, etc., was lost, and it became something like Vihar-centric thing. So people came to think, they thought that they were Buddhists, etc., but the society remained casteist. So that remained untouched. The first kind of dent came during when Muslim civilization actually stabilized in India. So that was something like a demographic shift. So there was nobody actually intervened into ideology, etc., during those times. But there was a strand of Sufism, for instance, and
Yeah.
even before that, there was something like you can call a descendant of Shramik ideology, etc., but in the form of bhakti saints. So those people also similarly ideologically opposed caste system. So these things have happened. Uh, so there has been lots of something like, because if the Muslim population in this country has come to some very sizable thing, it was the lower caste and Dalits actually who converted to Muslim Islam. Okay, so this way, this
Yeah.
was a demographic impact, but not a overall kind of thing. That came only during the colonial times. The colonial people, from their colonial logic, actually gave lot of sort of brought in lot of opportunities for the low caste people. Then they instituted caste, etc., and they created different kind of paradigm which catalyzed kind of anti-caste, anti-Brahmin movement, and so on and so forth, right? So there,
Right.
a comprehensive kind of counter became palpable against the caste system. So we are now inheriting from that. The post-colonial regimes, you touched upon a British census and what kind of impact it has happened. It has uh, caused something like caste system. So that is again very documented fact, not to be elaborated anyway, that they rigidified. This was caste used to be something like a local, relational, contextual kinds of system. Again, it stands to logic that there were no communication means existing. So people, the village system was a self-sufficient village system. At the most, the cluster of villages had a market system, etc., and to that extent only their communication remained. Beyond that, they did not know. There was no world for them beyond that. But British brought and sort of communication system came in. The people started moving around, and when the caste census actually codified the caste, etc., they start So the linkage between their caste and something like a fellow from Tamil Nadu would see that it's a similar caste exists in Arunachal Pradesh. Oh, let
Hmm.
us now. So before the caste reservations came in, so there was a fight for superiority. Okay.
Hmm.
So every caste sort of wanted and represented to the British enumerators and British administrators that their caste has been superior, hmm, than what the society acknowledged. Okay.
Hmm.
There are many cases like
Yeah.
what comes to my mind offhand is Bhumiyar, for instance, in Bihar.
Right. Right.
Bhumiyars were the landed caste. Okay,
Right.
they were counted as Shudras. But
Right.
Bhumiyar, because of their agriculture prowess, etc., in certain pockets, they accumulated good amount of wealth and power.
Hmm.
So on that basis, they represented that no, we are Brahmins. So now
Right.
they get counted as Bhumiyar Brahmin. So such kind of changes have happened, and it has coagulated huge amount of this middle caste changes in this
Hmm.
form. But
Right.
when based reservations came in, okay, during colonial times, it is not the post colonial discovery or anything. People again
Yeah.
do not know the genesis of such kind of things, and very superfluously talk about reservations also. The reservations were brought in by British for an exceptional people for as an exceptional policy. Now,
Hmm.
British had a colonial logic operating everywhere, but they were more sensible and honest than our post-colonial rulers. So these
Hmm.
people proved more scheming about it, and they have made a mess about it, and they weaponized the reservation
Hmm.
in the form that it is obtained today. So this is
Hmm.
what is happening.
Sir, so you feel that essentially what was a fight to get enumerated with the upper castes in the colonial era has become competitive victimhood solely because of reservations. In that case, if the very basis for caste based reservations is undermined, as the ruling regime seeks to do with the EWS scheme, it also means that some castes would then probably start getting identified with upper castes, since the reservation quota for EWS could also be increased, isn't it?
Yeah, okay. You see, we have already spoken about what is likely to happen. Okay.
Hmm.
If entire exercise is done very honestly, what it would throw is that there is something like an internal stratification in the BJP group
Hmm.
itself, right?
Hmm.
Which would indicate that there is a categorization or sub-classification, etc., is warranted. Second
Hmm.
thing is that the BJP the numbers of the backward caste also would be something like would go as a matter of fact they are quite in numbers. Okay, so this is again significant fact that would be thrown by the caste census is that
Hmm.
their numbers is far more greater than what is assumed. Okay,
Hmm.
arbitrarily some 50% cap is given by the Supreme Court, assuming
Hmm.
that uh, implementation of reservation, the merit should not be sort of squandered. Now, the
Hmm.
tacit assumption is that merit is only associated with upper caste,
Hmm. Hmm.
right?
Yes. Correct.
So,
Hmm.
so the challenge is that, and we have seen it what happened in the Bihar caste survey. Okay,
Hmm.
Bihar government came after caste survey that they have sort of instituted 65% reservation,
Hmm.
right? But so
Yes.
High Court of Patna actually struck it down as unconstitutional, the citing articles of 14, 15, 16.
Right.
Correct.
It was
Hmm.
even struck down in Telangana.
Now,
What?
yeah, it happened in Telangana, it happened in Maharashtra, it happened everywhere. Okay,
Hmm.
so this is what it is. Now it goes to Supreme Court, and what in courts actually get generated is only caste turbulence. So
Hmm.
people would get polarized, the real issues, etc., would get sidelined, and all those
Hmm.
kinds of things are going to happen. And next, anyway, I have spoken about that. What is likely to happen is that the upper caste also would be shown something like as backward, not statistically insignificantly backward than the reserved categories. So it actually helped the BJP, right?
Right.
So this is going to meaning this would be the aftermath of the exercise. So for quite some time, the entire thing would be actually castized. The entire discourse would be castized, and as if there is nothing remains in the country to be done, and only caste issue. So everybody knows that there is a vulgar kind of inequality this country suffers from, and that needs to be rectified. But it cannot be done with only caste idiom. You pointed out that the caste census would sensitize society about the facts that the upper caste are not as numerous as assumed, and the rather other caste are more populous. Okay. My counter question is that do you need caste census to learn such kind of things? Because there are many data bits. Even if you see the SECC survey in 2011 that they discarded anyway, where the data leaked and it showed that upper caste actually are not even 15%. It is 8 to 12%. Okay. So generally, if you go to Kashiram dictum, etc., then he assumed that something like a 15% versus 85%. Okay. The honest approach, why should people not be asking such kind of things to the social justice scam? That honest approach should be rather that to reserve reserve positions for this 15%, not for rest of the people. Okay. If government was concerned with this kind of social justice, then the entire percentage of the share of these people should actually be brought down to what their population constitutes. So that is about 15%, not to go for extremity to 8 to 10%. And leave rest of the things to the other people. Why create? But they will never do such kind of thing because it is not politically advantageous to them, because it actually eliminate the caste, and they want to have this caste okay, as a lever for political manipulation. So this has been the dishonest intent right from the beginning. So what do you
Sir,
do?
I agree
And
that.
the second question is, what do you do with that? What did Karnataka government did with this kind of discovery? These are the kinds of things. Are they going to come materialize? Because it's only when now the situation is such that whatever one person, Narendra Modi, decides, something like Inshallah बोलते थे ना, तो अभी Insha Modi बोलना पड़ेगा. So only that will happen in this country. So if this is the situation to that, and it is not hidden fact, the people ought to understand it, the situation, and in that context only all these kinds of things could be discussed.
Sir, you have extensively been writing about the politics of appropriation. You have referred to the appropriation of different ideologies by Brahminism in history. In fact, in Iconoclast, you have also referred to how the legacy of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar has been appropriated by successive ruling parties, first by the Congress, but later mastered by the BJP, who have then tried to de-radicalize the movement. Do you think the support for caste census by national parties, but the hesitation to spell out actual policies, arises from this politics of appropriation?
Yes, you are probably pointing toward the co-option strategy of the ruling classes. That has always been the mainstay of ruling classes all over the world. This has been there. So whenever you do not vanquish the opponents, then you co-opt them. So this kind of approach has been ubiquitous through history. So there is nothing wrong about it. Even it happened. The good example is something like a co-option of Baba Sahib for some time, and then that playbook they constituted, which was operated through post-Ambedkar period, and entire devastation of Dalit movement actually could be attributed to that, and all that kind of confusion that they seeded in. So this is also the caste census ploy also is of a kind. It may not be fully said as co-option because it is not this thing, but the entire co-option of opposition demand is very evident in the approach. If you take now historically, let me come to that this way, that caste census data, uh, British provided the caste census data. Now, Phule pioneered the non-Brahmin movement. He was a very rustic person. He did not so much gone in, get into the statistics, etc. But coined, very profound kind of formation, Shudra Ati Shudra versus
Right.
Shetji. Okay. In my
Yeah.
opinion, that actually is a very palpable kind of formulation for Indian revolution. Even today, it is remains untried, or unfortunately. Periyar came thereafter. Again, is a very similar profile person. He, without any going into any statistics, etc., he coined something like a political Dravidism, and became actually caught the fancy of people. And today, thereafter, it's all the Dravidian politics that prevails in Tamil Nadu. Okay.
Right.
Baba Sahib Ambedkar was a very learned person and actually took a thing of the statistics of British and was sort of got into something like a recognition representation kind of dictum, because that was the ruling dictum those days, and got misled into asking for a representation in the parliament and legislature, basically. Okay.
Yeah.
And later on, he had to relent it, meaning regret it. Okay. Baba Sahib Ambedkar, thereafter, it stands with people don't understand that he has been demanding annulment of Pune Pact, through which the reservation came. Okay. So not to go into something like separate electors, etc. In my elsewhere, I have even said, even I think in a class also, that even separate elections would not have worked because it has a relationship with the kind of election system. It presumes the default election system is the FTP. So
Yes.
that is the error. So
You
this
have
this
advocated for proportional representation instead of first past
yeah.
the post.
So that was an alternative which was never spoken about. When it actually cropped up in a Constituent Assembly, everybody opposed it, and it came starkly that actually basically Congress was opposing it because it wanted a single party strong government at the center. So none other than D.R. Gargi from their camp actually revealed everything. Okay. So this is the kind of mental blocks that at various points in time happen, and the history actually gets a different kinds of course. So this needs to be kept in mind. How in past things have happened, and what brought us to this fore.
Sir, I agree with you that this was a ploy by the British government to divide Indians. But as you yourself pointed out, the very fact that they publicized this data also helped anti-caste crusaders like Phule, Periyar and so on to fight the cause for OBCs and SC/STs, isn't it?
I
Is it
already
quite
told you
possible?
the answer answer is probably contained in the previous answer
Right.
that Phule did not have a caste census advantage. He did not look at the figures. Instinctively he knew, and everybody knows. All people, meaning all illiterate people, also know that the Brahminic caste actually are minuscule and they rule. Everywhere ruling classes would not have numbers. So Phule did not depend upon British caste census or anything. He instinctively came out with Shudra Trishudra combination versus Sedji Bhadji. So this is the formulation still valid for if you want to bring in radical change in India. So is the Periyar. So is Periyar. Periyar also did not give a damn to his numbers. And he said that these Brahmins have amassed all kinds of power and needed to be sort of demolished. Brahminism
Right.
needed to be demolished with this Dravidism. Dravid Dravidian people, they assimilated all castes together, which were not Brahmins, and they called that we are the original inhabitants, we are the Dravidian people, and these Brahmins came from outside, etc., and are ruling over us. So it is not a function of the caste numbers that British brought in. It is something like an instinctive, and it's an open secret in the land. So you do not
Right.
need censuses for such kind of thing.
Okay.
British brought in census for their own colonial purpose, divide and rule and all.
Right.
In both iconoclast and caste consensus, you have mentioned that during debates in the Constituent Assembly about abolishing untouchability, some radical voices felt that the symptom was just untouchability, but the disease was the caste system itself. In the neoliberal setup, where the starting point itself is highly unequal, you have argued that universal facilities by the government should be a precondition for reservation. Can you share more about your thoughts on this, sir?
Yeah, again, your question has many, many strands, but I will take the main ones. Okay. The Constituent Assembly debate about the abolition of untouchability, etc., is quite intriguing. One should understand it, that what kind of politics goes into, because when this thing came, only one single scheduled caste person, and he was the grandson of a pioneer of Dalit movement, in East Bengal in 1867. Hmm. His name was Harichan Thakur. His grandson, Pramat Ranjan Thakur, actually raised, he was first barrister from among the Dalit community, and he was a member of Constituent Assembly, of course, and he raised the point that how could untouchability be abolished when the caste system survives? So you are allowed to
Right.
actually abolish the caste system. And only two people, one was a Brahmin, one was a caste, Suresh Chandra Banerjee is a Brahmin, and another fellow was D.N. Mitra, who went to Pakistan and aided the constitution making, etc. They came into support of Thakur, and none of the people opened their mouth that time. And the bill was passed in jubilation of Mahatma Gandhi ki jai. So my contention is that reservation, even for the scheduled caste, forget about rest of it. Res- actually required a prerequisite of universal capability building in all people. Okay, without that, such kind of targeted schemes will not succeed. And empirically, it can be seen. You take an example of Dalit. Okay, the extent reservation system actually benefits who is already benefited. Even at the
Right.
start of it, the people who were in advantageous position, they only could send their children, etc., to the schools and colleges, etc., and grab the big posts. Their descendant, their children, and all these things stood in advantage vis-a-vis the people who have been left behind in the villages. They were bonded or quasi-bonded. Say, typically, a Dalit working in a brick kiln somewhere, their entire family actually slogs for a pittance. They are bonded because contractor has advanced them money, and they are bonded for that. So their children, his wife, and him, all people are engaged with that. Can you imagine that reservation? He can send people, his son or child to the school and avail of the reservation. So this becomes actually reservation actually benefits only educated. It is premised on education, and that education itself is a far cry. So this is just an illustration, what happens, that how the universalistic scheme actually should be the prerequisite for such kind of targeted policies. And the history is bloody testimony that whichever countries have advanced, they have actually had this universal approach firstly. And thereafter only the targeted approach came. Universal approach in terms of land reforms, education, healthcare, social security schemes have been implemented, and thereafter, whatever obstacles remained after implementing this are to be taken care by the targeted schemes. Okay,
Right.
targeted. schemes like uh, special kinds of education or outreach healthcare or housing support or affirmative action and so on and so forth. There is an example here. Everywhere it is something like take a Nordic countries example. It is
Yeah.
proven fact that wherever such kind of universalistic policies have been implemented, they have actually proved themselves to be more effective in reducing poverty, reducing inequality, and so on and so forth. Take a case of Sweden. The
Right.
post-tax disposable income Gini, which is a
Mm.
measure of inequality, is 0.29, almost close to zero, even less than 1%, less than quarter, meaning just about a quarter percent.
Yeah.
Okay, their
Yes.
poverty is something like 8 to 10% in OECD measures. So
Mm.
these are the brightest examples of success, and we have been talking only in language of caste.
Mm.
Now, you third strand, if I pick up from your question, is about something like reservation. Can it fight neoliberal kind of inequality?
Mm.
It cannot, because these are these are addressing something like a different axis. Reservation is a different axis and neoliberalism is a different axis. A
Mm.
reservation is basically trying to correct the past caste structured exclusion. Hmm?
Mm.
Okay, in terms of
Right.
job, in terms of all kinds of powers. And
Mm.
neoliberalism actually is generating kind of inequalities in present through the market system. So
Mm.
this needed to be understood firstly. So these are totally different taxes. So they
Mm.
do not have anything. Like reservation cannot address the concentration of wealth. Okay.
Mm.
Or corporatization or the withdrawal of state and things like that. So
Mm.
there is no connection between these two kinds of things. So neoliberalism, when it was brought in to the country, actually
Mm.
passed us by. And people start still, as the base for reservation was getting eroded, there was
Mm.
something like a crescendo about reservations. You
Mm.
see, like
Yeah.
even the rural dominant caste asking for reservation, or even the reserved category people asking for some categorization. These are the twin reactions for the neoliberal devastation, and they did not
Right.
understand that, because
Mm.
dominant caste also very devastated because their agriculture subsidies were withdrawn, their market volatility they suffered from, then the climate stress they suffered from. So they thought that their privileges, base of privileges actually is getting eroded, and
Mm.
and the neoliberalism privilege something like an urban capital, something upper caste kind of middle service elites, and the rural dominant caste were left out. So those people started feeling relative deprivation and started kind of uh, demanding reservation. From
Right.
one end, the reservation demand actually started coming from the very strong kind of caste, dominant caste, and other
Mm.
way around, the reservation categories, because their crisis actually manifested into demand for subcategorization. Your
Right.
Mala Madhika syndrome, for instance. Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
So that's a very interesting point you make. So you're saying that in the time in the 90s, when the neoliberal policies came into effect and started eroding the very meaning of reservations, was also the time when the Mandal politics and OBC reservation came into effect. So this is basically some sort of a contradiction, right? Where reservation is going up but public sector jobs are going down.
No, this actually throws up our intellectual poverty. Hmm. Okay, not to understand and get flown with something like what politicians or the state says.
Mm.
State creates a discourse because discourses are sustained by the power, and people do
Mm.
not have power. So the state has a power, politicians have power, and you would get flown in and carve out your argument that way. So this is nothing but the lack of understanding.
One of the differences you have with reservation is that it's an individual specific thing but given on the basis of overall backwardness of a caste. So you feel only a certain section gets uplifted, whereas there is no means to ensure that the entire community also gets uplifted. Basically, a creamy layer gets created within the community, and for this reason, you have come up with an innovative formula in your book, which basically says that the amount of reservation benefits a person has taken and what their family has taken will also be considered while providing reservation. This is very logical, sir, I agree. But your critics will say that it fails to take into account certain situations where in central universities and elite jobs, the Dalit community or backward communities may not even have any reservation. So even those who are slightly more forward than others will be the only representatives of the community in that job or university. How does this formula address that situation?
I'm not talking about creamy layer. Creamy layer is a different kind of concept. They actually define creamy layer by something like a well-off communities. Okay,
Mm.
reservation doesn't have anything to do with economics.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
the kind of thing that you are referring to from the book is a different kind of formulation. I am actually trying to correct the dichotomy that came in reservation policy, that although the reservation benefits accrue to the individual or at the max to his nuclear family, but it is
Mm.
counted against caste. This is the contradiction. So
Mm.
I have given an approach, to sort of counter this kind of dichotomy, that
Mm.
it extent reservation policy keeps on benefiting the benefited, already benefited. Okay,
Mm.
until reservation becomes meaningless to him. Okay,
Mm.
so there is something like a divide created between the reserved category itself, that the people
Mm.
who have been left behind, the
Mm.
distance between the beneficiaries and them gets
Mm.
expanded. So that
Mm.
this approach only bridges it. That now it is a profound misunderstanding to say that this does not address the central university or IIM, IIT kind of reservation thing. Anything, if you are any person who has not benefited would always, it doesn't come in thing, you know. I
Mm.
do not understand where this comes from, because this is a universal kind of thing.
Right. Mm.
Let in somebody applies to IIT professorship, the
Mm.
fellow has, say, equal kind of qualification, everything, and one fellow has, his father has been IAS, and the second fellow has a railway father as a railway coolie.
Mm.
Huh? Had never benefited earlier. So this fellow
Mm.
will automatically get preference over the fellow, the descendant of the IAS guy, and he would not be taken. This fellow will get a professorship. So this
Right.
I do not know. So this kind of lack of understanding actually people build around and create a kind of canard that I am
Mm.
against reservation or this, but they do not have any point, howsoever meaning give the solution, and these people will actually point halt.
I'll come to my final question. If I can quote you from the book, caste is not a problem that can be solved through piecemeal interventions. It is structurally intractable and historically fortified. What is needed is not an uncritical endorsement of caste enumeration in the name of social justice, but a historically grounded, politically sober, critical engagement with what it entails, while pragmatic and not becoming a substitute for the ultimate goal, the annihilation of caste. Sir, in what way do you think the caste census can actually help as a tool to realize the goal of annihilation of caste?
Yeah, actually, for a this reservation entitlement, no, it actually constitute a small sliver which on which entire country has been fighting. So this
Mm.
is this is the impact of that dominant discourse, which is
Mm.
unleashed by the ruling classes, and
Mm.
people have been sold out. It
Mm.
does not talk, meaning it created something like a vested interest, isn't
Mm.
it? This reservation discourse has spawned some vested interest, which bristle at the mention of caste annihilation.
Mm.
They adore Baba Sahib Ambedkar, but Baba Sahib Ambedkar himself actually gave that mantra. I am picked up that mantra from him. That
mm,
the ultimate solution to the caste system lies in annihilation of caste. And this is not something hypothetical or not doable. In the
mm,
history, many countries had such kind of things and they have actually gotten over that. And these castes are not visible there. And we are preserving caste here. Okay,
mm,
so any kind of thing, short-term measure that you take for correcting, like reservation, for instance, are okay. I'm not against it. But
mm,
all these kinds of strategies, all these kinds of policies, all these kinds of tactics should
mm.
actually cohere with the long-term goal. These people
Right.
keep on messing
Mm,
with long-term and short-term.
mm,
That is what actually all confusion stems from that.
mm,
So caste census, so long as it actually would rigidify the caste identities, would create a caste turbulence, would create all kinds of distracting discourses, would actually go against that goal. This doesn't coherent, it doesn't align with that goal. And that's why people should be skeptical about it. Right? So this is what the last comment I ended the book with, that
mm.
annihilation of things should never slip out of your sight. Okay, that is the
Absolutely.
ultimate solution. That is the ultimate emancipation of the people who think that they are caste oppressed.
While speaking of annihilation of caste, you have been calling for a broad coalition of caste and class politics as perhaps the long term solution for annihilating caste. Can you describe your proposal for this?
Yeah, it is a very simple thing again. Only the prejudiced mind does not or refuses to understand it. The caste, as I said, even Buddha's times and this and that and earlier answers, that caste is something like a life world. It actually assimilates all kinds of relations, and this is what the caste structure has been. Now, unless that caste structure is dynamited, uh, there is no solution, there is no caste annihilation. So that not only dharma shastra, as Ambedkar said, but this caste structure needs to be dynamited with
Mm,
all these constituent kinds of relationships, and that
mm,
could only be happening through something like a revolution.
mm,
So that is what is needed. And that is what is needed, meaning caste and class, etc. I have different notions about class also. So, but
mm,
using the conventional language, all these people, meaning all oppressed and exploited people, have to join together, because only
mm,
the oppressed caste cannot address this problem. It has actually become so gigantic. So that's
mm,
why this force will have to come together and kind
mm,
of create that kind of radical change. This is what is
mm.
meant by that.
So, that radical change will include other things also like aggressive land reforms, universalization of education, and so on.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because these are the relations needed to be dynamited first.
Right.
Okay. So caste is just the manifestation. Caste is just the sort of name for the this kind of bundle.
Mm,
That was a very enlightening interview, sir. We discussed on a host of issues related to caste census as well as the larger issues concerning reservation and the unity of all oppressed communities in fighting this social evil. Thank you very much for your time and for sharing your insightful thoughts with us.
Thanks, Sanjay. Thanks, Sujay. Sorry, thanks, Sujay. Good. You did lots of good amount of homework. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Bye.